Good afternoon, my fellow comm graduates. Well, soon to be comm graduates. All right, let me get the right binder. Okay. I remember 24 years ago, I was sitting right where you are, and I had just graduated. I packed up my car because, remember, TikTok, you need to be out of your dorms. I packed up my two-seater Geostorm, they don't even make that car anymore, and I hopped on the highway back to Chicago. I had gotten a job at a daily newspaper out there. They were impressed that I knew how to make websites. Yeah, Com 98. As a person who had chosen journalism, I was entering into a field where people said we might not be publishing stories in the newspaper anymore, that there was this new platform that this British scientist had created called the World Wide Web. There was little that I remember at that time in this rush to get to my new job, but there was one thing. As I hopped on the expressway, there was a song that was playing on the radio, and I remember it very vividly. It was by the Goo Goo Dolls. Who remembers the Goo Goo Dolls? All right, yes. The song was called Iris, and I'm just gonna say, yes, we have some fans. And it's a song that I remembered. It reminds me of my time in BU. Here's a phrase, and all I can taste is this moment. All I can breathe is your life. And sooner or later, it's over. And I just don't want to miss you tonight. I don't want the world to see me, because I don't think that they're going to understand. When everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am. I think about that often, every time I hear that song, every time I think about graduation. And so my message to you today is, who are you? I want to share with you two things that I've learned in the 24 years since I've graduated. Knowing your value and your values, and number two, to be intentional. In 2012, I started working at the Washington Post. I was in my late 30s, and I was very intimidated by the reporters around me. Most of us would be very excited. I was joining the Washington Post investigative unit, but most of them had a Pulitzer. Several of them had 2. Some of them had 3. I had none. I had straight imposter syndrome. Some of you probably have it in here. So I did this thing. I decided I was going to write down on a sheet of paper, a very tiny sheet of paper, so nobody could see it, what I thought was the value that I might bring to the table. Stuff that others on the team might not have, or an area where I thought that I excelled. So what I did, I wrote down things like, remembered I had produced an investigation in Chicago that had showed black people were disproportionately given subprime toxic loans. That investigation spurred an investigation by the state's Attorney General. That investigation spurred the US Department of Justice to action. And that led to the Justice Department's $8.7 billion settlement with Countrywide, the nation's largest mortgage lender at that time. So from that experience, it reinforced the idea that while I didn't have a Pulitzer, I had value. So I jotted down several things on this list. I could analyze data by myself. I didn't have to go to the social scientists or the data team to do it. I could do it. I had perspective as a person of color, as a woman. At the time, I was the only person of color on the investigative unit. I could tell complex stories in ways that were compelling to people, that really connected. But here's the important part. I couldn't just write these things down. I had to look at it often, those moments where you have your imposter syndrome. So I took it, and it was literally on the size of a Post-it sheet of paper, and I stuck it to my desk, a little area above it, where nobody could see it except for me, which was behind the LexisNexis codes. It was a constant reminder to me when things got tough, when I questioned who I was, what value I brought to the table. That was back in 2012, not too long ago. 4 years later, in 2016, I was part of the team that won the Pulitzer Prize. The next year after that, I led a year-long effort to document how police departments failed to keep problem officers off the force. The year after that, I undertook a major public records investigation to which I was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize again. Thank you. I go back to the song that I was listening to when I was in your seat and I had just graduated for comm. I somehow now became the person with the Pulitzer Prize. I had become someone. Needless to say, my alma mater was also pretty happy. My second point today is to be clear and intentional about what you want to accomplish daily. Fast forward to January 6th. I don't think I need to apply a year. There was an insurrection at the US Capitol. I was in my new job for 9 weeks. I had only been Washington bureau chief overseeing a 30-person office in DC when it happened. I remember getting a message from one of my reporters asking, are you watching TV? There's a riot at the Capitol. I thought he was being dramatic. I looked at my computer screen and I toggled to what was unfolding in front of me. The next text message came in from another staffer. She was trapped inside. I'm locked in the chamber with the House members, she said. The crowd has made it to the row, and she didn't finish the message. It was the rotunda. She was eventually rescued, and I was amazed at the work that my staff was able to produce that day and under pressure in the face of danger. But the days continued to be hard, and life in and around the Capitol was difficult. The parks where I used to go for my solace now had military Humvees. Morning runs past the Capitol now had people with long guns. There was a pandemic, and there was the insurrection to still live with. And here I was, as the first black woman to ever lead the Bureau since it began in the 1940s, the first person of color, the second woman. It was already tough, and now it was tougher. The days and nights blurred, and I have to be honest with you, I was burnt out. By the end of the summer, I was physically and mentally exhausted. I felt like I was shutting down, and so I stepped away from work for about 3 weeks. I went to sit on the water in the middle of nowhere where I didn't have to see people, and I started to think about my life, really to rethink my life. I remember I couldn't let life just carry me away from day to day. That wasn't working anymore. I had to center myself and be intentional about what I was doing in my life. So I began a journal. I made it a practice to do this every morning, even when I was in a rush. I started writing down my intention for the day. Sometimes it was just calm or peace. Sometimes it was joy. And some days I felt like just writing down shower. I had begun to learn a lesson. Life was always going to throw difficult circumstances at me. My life, for whatever reason, is destined to be a pioneer. It wasn't going to stop. It wasn't all of a sudden going to become easy. But what I realized is I would never be able to control the thing that was happening around me. Never fool yourself to think that. But I could control my response to it. By the end of the year, I had written down in the journal daily. My boss asked me to write down all I had accomplished that year. I said, well, I helped bring in the new executive editor of the LA Times, who's also a BU Comm alum. I had found the new TikTok host for the LA Times. I had launched 3 successful new series. I had led a 30-person team through a pandemic and through an insurrection. Everyone has been through a lot in the last 2 years, especially you all. You have endured a pandemic. You have become caregivers to family. You have lost loved ones. Some of you have lost jobs. You've studied while trying to put food on the table and while also trying to keep your family safe. You've learned over Zoom and have watched our industry struggle. And yet you still want to be a part of it. You're resilient and you're persistent. And it reminds me of another recent graduate that I know of. One of my sisters, she's actually here today. She was just like you. She finished her degree, but about halfway through got panicked. She wanted to give up because of all the chaos around her, and the pandemic as well, and the inability to see her way through it. But she didn't. She questioned, just like you might be today, am I even gonna get a job? Am I gonna use this degree? Would I make enough money? But just like you, she persisted. And you will too. She graduated last year and got a postdoc, and 2 weeks ago accepted a full-time job at the University of Houston. She did this through the pandemic, but that's not the kicker. She's 62. So remember this. Silence the noise around you. Know your value. Be intentional about your life. But most importantly, remind yourself often of that intention and your value. Scrawl it down somewhere, in a journal, on a Post-it, tape it to your mirror. But be intentional about your life and know that you have learned this at Boston University, and that you're going to move forward toward an industry in desperate need of you, and they're going to use what you have to offer. Congratulations to you, class of 2022.